Looking at the Philadelphia Phillies lineup projection is not a great way to inspire confidence in 2026. I'll tell you how I think it's going to break down on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now the number one sports podcast network, Locked On Phillies, is your number one spot for Philadelphia Phillies content regularly 3 times a week throughout the offseason. So I appreciate you joining us. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You might know me for some of my other work in the sports talk space. I've been on air over at 97.5 The Fanatic, doing sports talk radio here in Philadelphia for over 6 years. Been a credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member for the past 4 seasons, and this is now my 4th year as the host of Locked On Phillies. We're going to start out today's episode by putting together a lineup projection for the Philadelphia Phillies for 2026. And I like some of the things the Phillies have done this offseason. But in going through this exercise, I did not like how this lineup looks, at least with World Series expectations on the line. We're also going to get into some Mailbag Monday comment additions from our most recent YouTube videos. And we have the Andrew Painter poll results on how the fan base is viewing his potential production in his first major league season, if that is indeed what we see this year, which is what is expected. So a lot of listener engagement. And hopefully that lightens the mood, because this first segment might not get you in a great mood for the Philadelphia Phillies 2026 season. I decided today, I was like, hey, let me put together what the projected lineup is for the Phillies, because you can take a look at individual players and numbers and say, oh, okay, well, I kind of like this guy's offensive profile. Or that guy plays great defense, and the Phillies needed that at that position. Or I like what that guy was able to do at another stop in his career. Maybe if he recaptures that, he could be a huge benefit to where the Philadelphia Phillies are today. Or could it be a breakout year for a player that's already been here? These are all thoughts that pop around your head in the offseason while you're trying to talk yourself into why this team could be better, why this team could be different. And let me state this first and foremost. This Phillies team doesn't have to be that much different. They don't. They won 96 games last year, the National League East. They had the second best record in all of baseball. They ran into the defending World Series champions, who ended up winning back-to-back, and they got beat by them. So it's not like this is 2023 where they fell off to the Diamondbacks and it's just like, what in the world's wrong with this team? They're close. Now, that doesn't really help you sleep at night, but they are close. It's undeniably, logically true that they're close, but they don't really seem to be interested enough in making heavy changes that could push them over the hump. Maybe there is no hump to get over with the Dodgers. That's a conversation for the season. We'll see how that plays out. But I think a great way to evaluate how good could this team really be, where are they actually at, is by putting down a physical 1 through 9 lineup and seeing, maybe they don't fit together as well as I thought. Maybe there are some more weaknesses than when you just look at the individual players. Or maybe the lineup makes you feel better about the team as a whole than looking at individual players will do. But clearly you can see where I lean, because I'm a positive Phillies guy. I think this is a really good baseball team with a really great opportunity for the 5th straight year. But the lineup isn't exactly inspiring if you don't believe that they have the pieces from previous teams to continue to compete at this level or to get further into championship contention. So let me read you what I have first and foremost. The first thing we'll be able to go back and forth on and debate is this lineup the smartest way to do it? This is just how I put it together. So you can let me know in the comments if you would order these guys differently. But for me, I looked at what the Phillies did most often last year, and I'll explain that as I go through the names. I tried to mirror that so I can mirror Rob Thompson's tendencies, so what we're doing is realistic. And I tried to fill out the new guys or the new potential parts of the order in the way that would seem to fit them best. The top 3 are not changing. Trea Turner is batting leadoff. Kyle Schwarber is batting in the 2-hole. Bryce Harper is batting third. The guy who's leading off led the National League in batting average this past year. The guy batting second led the National League in homers and RBIs. We ain't changing that stuff. That's what it's going to be. And Bryce Harper is going to be batting third. By the way, Wednesday's episode this week, we're going to have a heavy conversation on Bryce Harper and his new clothing line, apparently, that says not elite. So that'll be something that we dive into in another episode this week. But Turner, Schwarber, Harper, it's what the Phillies mainly did last year at the top of their order. That's what they're mainly going to do this year. I do not think that's changing. But cleanup is a spot that's been so tricky for the Phillies to figure out because it doesn't feel like Bryce Harper has had enough protection. Kyle Schwarber got protection from Bryce Harper this past year. Bryce Harper was not afforded that by the Nick Castellanos, Max Kepler, JT Realmuto, Alec Bohm, that grouping of guys that they tried to figure out what was going on at the cleanup spot. None of them got it done, which is why I don't have any of them in the cleanup spot in this projected lineup. I have Adolis Garcia there. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, nobody in this Phillies lineup that is outside of those top three guys, Turner, Schwarber, Harper, has ever really been able to lock down the cleanup spot for the Philadelphia Phillies. It just hasn't worked for Bohm, for Realmuto, for Marsh, for Castellanos, for anybody. So I'm going with the new guy. And what is Adolis Garcia's number one benefit at the plate to this team? Right-handed power. Fits great in that cleanup spot if he is who he was in 23 in Texas. Now, his past 2 years have not been that. So you might say, well, Connor, you're banking a lot on Adolis Garcia. Well, who would you rather have? Bohm? Realmuto? Marsh? I think he's the best option, Garcia is. And the other thing, too, is at least Garcia is a guy that you're afraid to make a mistake to. Pitchers are not afraid to make a mistake to JT Realmuto. Pitchers are not afraid to make a mistake to Alec Bohm because those guys can't consistently hit the ball out of the park enough to make you pay. You're not worried as much about giving up singles or doubles. You're worried about giving up the long ball. And while JT Realmuto and Alec Bohm had stretches of this past year where they were both really good, if I'm a major league pitcher getting on the mound and my option is Harper or Realmuto or Bohm, I'm taking either of those two other guys. Now, I'm probably taking Adolis Garcia over Harper as well. But at least with Garcia, there's that intimidation factor. This dude can mash if he gets a hold of one. And maybe he will. So I got to be a little bit careful. I just can't I can't have lapses in the at-bat. So that's why I have Garcia batting cleanup. But it was tough for me to make that decision. And then your 5-hole, I've got Alec Bohm there. And I don't really feel great about him batting fifth. It's better than cleanup. But again, that's another spot where you'd expect some power production. And he hasn't really been able to create power production in his career with the Phillies. Brandon Marsh, I have batting sixth. And the bottom part of your order, and I have this against a righty. So that's why Marsh and you'll see Stott are eventually in. I'm just going with the stock right-handed starter. This would obviously flip to, I guess, Otto Kemp and Edmundo Sosa if it was a lefty. But Brandon Marsh, I have batting sixth. JT Realmuto batting seventh. Bryson Stott batting eighth. And Justin Crawford, the rookie, batting ninth, playing center field. And from Bryce Harper down, you have Adolis Garcia, who the Phillies are gambling on, who has not had a last great couple of years. Alec Bohm, whose power is non-existent. Brandon Marsh, who is streaky, had a really good stretch to end last season. Can't hit lefties at all, so that goes out the window anytime you face a left-handed pitcher. And he's streaky. JT Realmuto, who's another year older, who had a rough start to the season, much better second half, but he's inconsistent over the past couple of years. Bryson Stott, who is a platoon player at best right now because he can't hit lefties. And even against righties, he struggled for a lot of 2025. And Justin Crawford, who's never faced major league pitching before. Outside of your top three, which are an incredible top three, you could argue that any of 4 through 9 could have a subpar year. You could also argue that, hey, Alec Bohm's been an all-star starter before. JT Realmuto's been an all-star before. Bryson Stott has had moments where he's looked like a guy that could bat leadoff for this team. Justin Crawford has all of these expectations of a top prospect, and Adolis Garcia was an ALCS MVP, a World Series champion, and was probably the most impactful bat on that Texas Rangers team in that postseason run. So there's upside. I don't want you to just hear this and say, wow, Connor, you're so down on the Phillies all of a sudden. Is the holiday season not got you in the cheerful spirit? I say, well, I'm just evaluating. It has nothing to do with the holidays. But no, I'm not so much down on this team. It's just when I see that lineup, I say, okay, there's a lot of places where this could go wrong. And I guess you could say that for every lineup. But one more bat to be able to balance this out would be a game changer. If it was Harrison Bader, for example, you could bat him fifth behind Adolis Garcia to give him some more protection. Then you could go Marsh, Bohm, Realmuto, and then, or you could go Crawford at the end, and you could go Bohm, Stott, Realmuto. It just, adding one more bat could kind of balance out the bottom part of the lineup a little bit more. It is also still relatively lefty heavy. You got Turner as a righty, you got Garcia as a righty, you got Bohm, and you got Realmuto as a righty. So 4 of your 9 bats in that lineup are right-handed. The other 5 are lefties, and 2 of those 5 lefties are 2 of your most important batters in Schwarber and Harper that are going to be batting back-to-back. You can't really split them up, so that gives advantages to opposing bullpens. These are the weak spots of the Phillies lineup, and I don't know. I don't know how that plays out. If that is indeed the lineup, we will see if they make another addition. Of course, also, this is even assuming JT Realmuto comes back. Could you imagine if that spot is now Rafael Marchand or Garrett Stubbs? They're not batting 7th, they're batting 9th. And then you're probably moving rookie Justin Crawford up to the 7 hole, if you can even do that, because then you've got 2 lefties in a row or 3 lefties in a row with Stott and Crawford and Marsh. Like, I don't know, man. It's a tricky thing to make fit to think, hey, this team's going to knock off the Dodgers. It screams that you're going to need an outfield acquisition at the deadline. And I've seen a lot of people saying that. Unless you do it in the offseason, there's something coming we're not expecting. But when I go through that exercise, I have my reservations about what the Phillies could be this year as far as championship contenders. Could they still win the NL East? Absolutely. Should they still win more than 90 games? 100%. But there's a limitation to this team as currently constructed, at least if you just look at the lineup. Do you have a really good starting rotation? Do you have a bullpen that I believe will be improved? We'll see how that all plays out. Coming up next, we've got some great Mailbag Monday questions from the YouTube comments. Some interesting stuff that you wanted to know in our past couple of episodes. So I went back and I found a couple. We're going to jump into some questions from you as we continue today's episode. Let's talk about FanDuel first, though, because Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel's making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. You just open the FanDuel app during the happy hour period, and it always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, and some surprises that we're not even going to tell you about right now. You got to go to the app to check, but it's worth it. And it's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect, right before the games, right before the weekend starts, probably right after you got done work. It all fits together, and it adds a little extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour, only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Let's talk a little bit about what you want to talk about. Mailbag Monday questions from the comments section. And there are a couple that I really wanted to get to today that have some bearing on some things that I've already said and some things that we haven't really gotten into. Now, I believe I've answered this question before, but I saw it again, and it's been a little bit. And the Nick Castellanos conversation is one that we're going to continue to have throughout the offseason until he's traded. Charles Brumel, 6548 on YouTube, comments and asks, how about trading Cassidy to St. Louis for Arenado? Arenado owed $27 million, $5 million paid by Colorado, so $22 million in 2026 and $15 million in 2027. Arenado plays third for the Phils, and Castellanos goes there to St. Louis. And to that, I just say, do you know who Nolan Arenado is at this point in his career? When was the last time you really watched Nolan Arenado play? Like, I don't know, a week straight worth of baseball, and tell me what he looks like right now. Because I think people are assuming they're getting the Colorado Rockies version of Nolan Arenado. This last year, in 401 at-bats, he hit 237 with 12 home runs. He isn't the same. I mean, as far as home runs are concerned, 12 in 2025, 16 in 2024, 26 in 2023 when he was an All-Star is great, but he's had 2 straight seasons where he has just been not good at the plate. And at least in 2024, he batted 272. This past year, 237, that's just nowhere near good enough. His strikeouts, 101 in 2023. 92 in 2024. At least he cut down on that this past year. But Nolan Arenado is not this all-star caliber player. Like 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 2020, he was not an all-star. 21, 22, 23. That is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 9 years. The guy was an all-star caliber player. One of the great defenders in the game. There's a lot of stuff to like about his, I guess, Hall of Fame resume, if you look at it that way. And I mean, I think he's got a ways to go there. Needs a little bit more longevity, but that's a conversation for another show, another time. Bottom line is this. At age 34, the guy seems washed. So what are you going to do? You're going to give him the opportunity on a multi-year deal to come to Philadelphia? It's not like you're going to all of a sudden turn around and trade him next year if this doesn't work out. Like, he's got to be here. No one's going to take him, especially at the dollar amount he's getting. If you can't move Nick Castellanos, well, the Cardinals haven't been able to move Arenado either. And then you'd have to find a way to move Bohm after acquiring his replacement, which again makes that difficult because Bohm's market's not there. I don't think Nolan Arenado is an answer at third base. I don't think Nolan Arenado is a potential piece that they would trade for Castellanos because there is no market for Castellanos. It would create an issue with Bohm. There are so many parts of that just don't work logically. And I'm sorry to just be like, yeah, there's no way, but there's no way. Nolan Arenado is not going to be a member of the Philadelphia Phillies. He will not be playing third base for this team, and he will certainly not be traded for Nick Castellanos. I appreciate the question. I get where your mind's at. Look at the recent numbers and also consider the logic of a guy in Nick Castellanos with absolutely no market ending up with a return of a guy who was an all-star in 8th and 9th seasons. It's just not gonna happen. All right, we have one more question to get into for our Mailbag Monday comments edition that I want to discuss, and this comes from MMR Seed on the YouTube, so I appreciate that, MMR Seed. Serious question. I'm glad it's serious. Why should I have any level of excitement about Adolis Garcia's signing when no Dombrowski outfielder signings have ever panned out except the Bader trade, which he let walk? Sorry, but the bar is low for a Casty upgrade at the corner position, which we are now paying $30 million a year for in total. Aren't you just a ray of sunshine today, Mr. or Mrs. at MMR Seed? Why would you have any faith in Dave Dombrowski? You're not alone. I see this echoed a lot of places where it's like every move this guy makes stinks. Why is he here? He's living off his resume. This guy will never win. He's a multi-time World Series champion, winning head of front offices. But let's ignore the facts for a second. Let's talk about just what he's done in Philadelphia. And I assume you're talking about all moves in the outfield because you brought up Harrison Bader, who was a trade. Totally fine. I understand your point. We're talking about outfield acquisitions. Bader was a hit. You cannot argue that the Phillies did not get more than what they bargained for out of Harrison Bader this past year. Whether they re-sign him this offseason or not, they got their prospects worth with Harrison Bader. Now, prior to that was Max Kepler. Did the Phillies get their money's worth with Max Kepler? Absolutely not. He was a disappointment. And, okay, so at worst, Dombrowski's batting .500 right now. Last year, you saw, or well, I guess it's 2 years ago now, right? The Austin Hayes trade deadline move. the guy had a kidney issue. He had injuries. You never really got to see what he was. There was a point this year where he was hitting over 300. And you just look at that and say, at least if you're me, hey, you didn't really get a full evaluation of who Austin Hayes was. If you're going to consider that a miss, fair, but don't be like Dave Dombrowski brought in a guy who flat out stunk. He couldn't evaluate outfield talent. Just got unlucky with the injury situation. Maybe Hayes would have stunk here. Maybe he wouldn't have if he was fully healthy. We'll never know. Prior to that, you can look at other options in the outfield and look at Nick Castellanos and say, well, for the amount that you're paying him, you really aren't getting or never got the return that you'd expect from that type of a contract. There is this one kind of caveat to the whole Dave Dombrowski can't bring in an outfielder thing. Didn't that guy who just lead the National League in home runs and RBIs and was runner-up for NL MVP and has hit like 40-plus bombs every season he's been here, wasn't he signed as an outfielder? I know Kyle Schwarber DHs now, but that's a guy you added to your outfield who played the outfield in his first year here. That's the thing. Some people just go too far. Because we haven't seen it a couple of times in a row, people are like, Dave Dombrowski, everything he does is terrible. And we're going to go, well, because Dombrowski signed him, Adolis Garcia is not going to possibly work out. Kyle Schwarber's one of the best, well, not anymore because you re-signed him. He was one of the best value contracts in baseball this year, and his primary position was outfield when the Phillies signed him. Nick Castellanos has had big-time postseason moments. Harrison Bader was huge. At worst, Dave Dombrowski is a coin flip in acquiring outfielders, which is that good enough? Maybe your standard's higher than that. I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but to go out and say, why should I have any level of excitement on Adolis Garcia because Dave Dombrowski hasn't been able to evaluate outfielders, that's completely unfair. Now, should he be better? You can make that argument. I think he should. I think the Max Kepler miss is a big one. I wish the Austin Hayes thing would have worked out. I feel like they could have found better options than Max Kepler this past year. So you can look at that multiple different ways. Weston Wilson, Otto Kemp, I don't think are answers. Who knows what Brandon Marsh is going to be? There's a lot of stuff to talk about there. But as far as I'm concerned, Dave Dombrowski is at worst a coin flip when he evaluates outfielders. And to say that just, I don't like the Garcia signing because I don't like the guy who made the signing is unfair to the player, unfair to the situation. And that's too hasty for evaluating this. So take a deep breath. Now, if he gets this one wrong, that's another point in your win column if you don't like Dave Dombrowski and the way he handles bringing in outfielders. But you can't just do, Dombrowski signed him, so why should I have faith? It's just not fair to the situation. And blanket statements like that should never be applied to any level of signing, especially not for a future Hall of Fame executive. So I appreciate the questions. I'm sorry to disagree with both of the folks who I responded to on today's episode, but I do. And those are my thoughts on that. We do Mailbag Monday every Monday, so you'll get a chance to get your questions in on X next week as we go back to the Twitter version of that to start 2026. But as we continue today's episode, we also had a poll question that we have not gotten to yet with the holiday last week and everything. Where is the fan base as far as expectations for Andrew Painter? Is he going to be good or not? It's a fair question. Nobody really has the answer to that. But what is your gut telling you? I'll tell you what the people said as we continue today's episode. All right, real quick before we get going, I want to thank you one more time for checking out Locked On Phillies today. And thank you for making Locked On Sports the #1 sports podcast network. And if you haven't already, you can go check out our new Everydayer Club. It's a great opportunity for you to get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Phillies, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, every other major podcast app. So you get a chance to get ad-free content, and you get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everyday Club Discord server, where we're all in there, all the Locked On hosts, just chopping it up, talking about everything going on with your favorite teams. A lot of great stuff there. As far as you're concerned, if you do that, I even just appreciate you subscribing to the YouTube or rating and reviewing. If you're listening to us in podcast form, we're available wherever you get your podcasts. But if you want to take it a step further, you can go to lockedonphillies.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more and go ahead and check out our brand new Everydayers Club. Now, let's talk about these poll results on Andrew Painter and what you're thinking about him for the 2026 season. Now, this is very subjective, the way I worded this poll, because, I don't know, everyone's expectations may be different. I said, what do you think is more likely for Andrew Painter this season in the big leagues? Exceeds expectations, underperforms. Now, whatever your expectations are could vary. But what I'm trying to visualize, or what I'm trying to represent here, I guess, by asking the question that way is just, are you feeling good about Andrew Painter or bad about Andrew Painter? He's a top level pitching prospect. And he had a rough year this past year. And he has an elbow issue with coming off of Tommy John. And he's working back from that. And maybe this is the breakout year. Maybe it's not. There's a lot of noise surrounding a guy that we have not seen pitch at the major league level ever. And 2 years ago, people were crazy excited. Prior to Tommy John surgery, people were crazy excited. Now, all of a sudden, the guy has one bad year in the minor leagues, and 69% of responders are saying that they believe it's more likely that Andrew Painter underperforms in 2026. What? Nearly 3/4 of the people responding to this poll are saying that they expect him to underperform, or that it's more likely that he underperforms. Only 31% of you believe he could exceed expectations. There are a couple of things to acknowledge that are just things you have to accept when asking the question that way. For a top prospect being put into a rotation for a World Series contending team, the expectations could be really high, right? For you as an individual fan. You could expect him to be a top half of the rotation guy. And if he doesn't slot in as that in a stacked rotation already, that could be underperforming expectations to you. So the bar is pretty darn high for Andrew Painter, considering what he's done in the minors. So maybe that leads to 69% of responders saying that it's more likely that he underperforms. They just believe the bar is being set really high based on his minor league track record and prospect standing. And if that's your reasoning, that's fair. But I find it hard to believe that that's everybody who voted on this poll. And clearly there are still more folks that think he does worse than does better. I think we are being way too hasty to evaluate Andrew Painter as he continues to work his way off Tommy John surgery. Every single person that I've ever talked to about Andrew Painter, and I'm not talking about people on the street. I'm not talking about callers or texters on the radio. I'm talking about people who evaluate prospects for a living, who have watched this kid throughout his minor league career, who know his arsenal, his makeup, his everything, from following this very closely. Every single person I've talked to has said, the stuff is still there. It will play at the major league level. The makeup is good enough to be a top-end Major League Baseball starting pitcher. The focus and work ethic is there. The delivery is repeatable. It is stable. It is not effortless, but it is not something that puts unnecessary strain on his body. So the worry about further injury is not necessarily high for him. Everything about this kid says he's going to work at the major league level. He's going to be a benefit for the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. And so many people saw a down year and just said, yeah, to hell with him. There's another prospect that doesn't pan out. Because a down year at the major league level, you can sell as development. But why is it when guys have down years at AA or AAA, all of a sudden it seems that the fan base forgets about them as far as prospects? It's because we're not watching. All you see are the numbers. You don't see the great strikeout he had against XYZ batter, right? Because we're not watching minor league baseball day in and day out. And I'm not saying I am, right? I'm just saying that I know for a fact there are prospects that I've given up on too soon. There are prospects that I've anointed too soon. But when a lot of folks around baseball are telling you this guy is good, and in one season, which was only 2 years removed from major elbow surgery, goes not to plan, you now expect him to underperform at the major league level? I'm not quite there to where I'm like, you guys are crazy. Andrew Painter's going to be great. I guarantee it. Like, no, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if you're down on Andrew Painter right now, and like, this kid isn't going to pan out, I think that's even crazier. I think it's more likely the guy exceeds expectations. I do. If your expectations are go out there and throw 100 innings to a sub 4.5 ERA and have more strikeouts than you have innings pitched at the major league level, just some baseline general ideas, I think he exceeds that. I think he does. He hits all of those marks in 2026. Guy's that good of a talent. Just matters that he's healthy and that he's able to progress. And Caleb Cotham's done a great job at progressing young pitchers. So what's there to be worried about? Let the kid rip. The Phillies could certainly use it this year with the Zach Wheeler injury and going to be losing Ranger Suarez, it seems. He's going to get his opportunities. I think we need to have a little more faith in Andrew Painter as we get ready for the 2026 season. That's all for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff. And on Wednesday's episode, because we're 3 times a week now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we will have one on New Year's Eve. Bryce Harper, he's being petty. He's acting hurt. But could it be for the best for the Phillies? We'll talk about that on our next episode. So I will talk to you on Wednesday on our next episode of Locked On Phillies.